Hare Krishna. Welcome back to the Atma Paradigm, when we're continuing part 4 of our series entitled The Universe and Beyond. And today's topic is the virtual reality analogy of cosmic existence. And we're doing this in 2 parts. Today's part is high-tech reality. Now, a couple of years ago, I was part of a consultation group exploring the ethical questions being raised by society's adoption of and its reliance on artificial intelligence. Now, the group included the top AI scientists from the UK, including those behind the Turing and the Leverhulme Institute, and also Cambridge's DeepMind. And the sort of things we were discussing were life and death decisions currently being made by algorithms. We looked at the problems of unconscious bias introduced by programming and deep learning, and the fact that decision making behind AI outputs are really by nature unfathomable. They can never be fully transparent. Now, a lot of this, what we discussed, was worrisome, if not maybe a little even scary. But we were asked to come up with a list of the positive benefits of the world when it's invested in AI. So it was hoped that we'd each bring out some different idea to the usual. And there were lots of intriguing kind of suggestions. And I put forward that one benefit of a society so familiar with the concepts of computing and smart technology, gaming and virtual reality, the benefit of that was that people now have a reference point, a familiar analogy upon which to think about certain tricky metaphysical concepts, particularly about the nature of reality, or really how we experience reality. And one journalist who was at the workshop then asked me to turn this idea of high-tech Vedanta into an article for Aeon magazine. Now, perhaps in times past, people were more in tune and able to conceive of states of reality not apparent to our senses. And maybe the rather mechanistic approach of Western science, philosophy and education has blunted our ability and perhaps our willingness to consider what may lie beneath the layers of the surface of existence. But the emergence of all sorts of electronic technology offers some very interesting parallels and analogies that can help us appreciate certain facets of the metaphysical world. So in this session, and also in the next, I hope to unpack a few key points with the help of some high-tech examples. Today we're going to focus on the nature of manifest reality. And next time we're going to consider our psychological experience and preoccupation within it. So first, let's remind ourselves where we are, where we got to from last week. A little summary of the topics we discussed. We presented the case for consciousness being a non-temporal feature of reality, and we offered various studies that support or at least consistent with that conclusion. And this indicated that consciousness may persist even if unembodied. That consciousness doesn't require to be incarnated and active within a physical body in order to generate will and intention. We then discussed the idea of aggregated consciousness, or more precisely the aggregation of the intentions of many, many individual Atma units of consciousness, whether embodied or otherwise. And when we talk of aggregated intention, we don't mean groupthink. We're not talking about the situation where a whole lot of people start to think along the same lines, like the echo chamber of social media. Nor do we mean the purposeful discussion, say, of a jury in trying to reach a unanimous verdict. That's not what we mean by aggregated intention. No, it's more subtle, and the individuals involved don't even have to be aware of how they contribute to the aggregation of intention. And I think this is best understood from a high-tech example. Perhaps like how Google or another search engine may log all your searches, and from those form an overall picture of the various interests that you have. And this type of data representing our aggregated interests is now very valuable. On many websites, we are paying for our use of that website by contributing data about our preferences and habits. And it said we've basically become the product that these sites harvest and then sell on. So this information can be sold to other companies to guide product development and marketing strategies. It's aggregated intention. And so, as we pointed out last session, aggregated doesn't mean merged. The totality of all the data gathered online is useful for society-wide trends. But your individual interest is also preserved. And so you'll find yourself being followed online by advertisements for something that you Googled recently or looked up in some marketing site. And on the basis of conscious being non-temporal, then the next point we suggested was that it's reasonable to propose that this aggregation of conscious intent exists from the start of and even prior to the universe. Hence, such aggregated consciousness or intention may provide the universe with a pre-existing source of specifying information. Information that might initiate the appearance of matter from its substrate, and that would provide specification for the various parameters of physics and the processes of cosmic development, including providing the universe with an underlying metaphysical or subtle template. And we suggested examples of opportunities within the standard model of cosmology for the input and interaction by which aggregated intentional information might play its part. Now, however, we did stress that the principles behind this non-temporal aggregated consciousness doesn't depend on the validity and accuracy of any aspects of the standard model of cosmology. We just use the narrative of the standard model, the Lambda CDM model, just to explain the potential of our metaphysical proposition to addressing the questions of cosmogony. So this gave us a picture of our extra universal reality like this. Matter in its potential state, i.e. energy which is devoid of any type of physical manifestation or differentiation. We had information, i.e. sufficient specifying information that results in the only or most likely outcome of the universe as it is, perfectly tuned, ready to accommodate life. And consciousness, in its state as aggregated and non-embodied. And in the process of addressing these issues of the origins and development of the universe, we've proposed, and I believe justified, the principle of something extraordinary. This aggregation of non-temporal, non-embodied consciousness. Now this has major implications for everything we know and care about. It changes how we think about the world around us and what we believe about our own lives. So in this context of aggregated non-temporal consciousness, what is reality for us? How does reality work? And where do we fit in? So we'll be drawing on certain concepts derived from the wisdom schools of Vedanta, Sankhya and Yoga. And I'll try to explain and justify the usefulness of these concepts, employing, as I said before, some examples from the realm of electronic technology. First, we're going to summarize how the overall universe works in terms of the interplay of certain key components: consciousness, matter, information, time, as well as their outcomes and products. Here are the components. Consciousness. And in this context of the big picture of the universe, we're talking about aggregated consciousness. The total of all intentions of all Atmas, all conscious entities associated with this universe. Then there's the matter. And matter, first, as the material cause of all things in the universe. We're talking of matter as material ingredients in potential state. So you're going back, an example would be like clay is to a pot, but clay itself is a production of something else, and we're talking about material ingredients in their absolute raw state. So consciousness is the source of specifying information, and this information acts on the ingredients of matter and converts the potential that raw material offers into various specific material objects and their particular properties. So the material ingredients are the material cause, and the information content is the efficient cause. It's what makes the matter do what it's going to do. Together they produce the manifestations of the objects and actions in the universe. So this, and we're talking in general metaphysical terms here. So this combination of material and information is like a vase being produced from the coming together of the clay as the raw material and the mind and the skill of the potter, or of a constructed table, resulting from the timber materials along with the plan of the carpenter and also, of course, the use of his tools. Or the resulting output could entail action and movement. And, that's where you might have, say, an expert snooker or pool player planning a particular shot and then executing it by hitting the cue ball in just a particular way so that it and all the other balls end up where he wants them to. But it has to be said that most of our intentions are not as specific as those examples of the potter, the carpenter, or the pool player. Most of our intentions and the results that we get tend to be pretty haphazard, unwanted, or troublesome. However, in any case, the objects and actions are the things that we experience with our senses. We and others get to experience or enjoy or suffer or admire the objects that we design or create or manifest. So the information that has been put into the development of material ingredients and producing objects and actions is being returned to us. So I suppose it's a bit like the artist or the carpenter sitting back and appreciating the object they just created. But this whole universe works on this principle of circulating information. And that is one of our topics for today. So, and perhaps as we ponder something that we've created, we might think, next time I can do it differently, maybe improve on it. So we're starting to kind of create a feedback into our next form of creation. So this cycle of creating and experiencing creations and improving goes on. Now, I've used examples describing this process as if it's applying to us humans. I'm trying to kind of bring it home for us. But I mean, in the context of this particular diagram, this particular concept we're discussing, I mean it to be considered in a very broad sense. So instead of limiting what we mean by consciousness to you, me, and a few billion humans, let's think of consciousness as the aggregate of every single Atma present in the universe, whether currently in an embodied state or not. We can then apply the principles behind this system to the whole of manifested reality, the cosmos, nature, everything. Now, as we explained last time, this ability for matter to change from one form to another requires facilitation by the agency of time. Time enables the information content of material things to be altered from one moment to the next, and then for those objects and actions to fade away, be dissolved back into the raw materials, and ready to be remanifest again. These are the components: consciousness, matter as both potential ingredients and manifest objects, information and time. And I've used a circle figuratively to represent the totality of all of our components gathered together. We discussed in part 2 that although each of these components exhibit unique properties, distinct from the properties of the other components, consciousness is different to material ingredients, time is different from both of them, and so on, they also enjoy some form of commonality or relationship with one another that allows them to interact with each other. And we refer to this situation as a kind of ontological state of simultaneous oneness and difference. And one way to think of this is like the totality of a family. So these components that I've put in our little circle are like children produced from the parents of the totality. And therefore you can say they are ontologically dependent on the parents for their existence, and together parents and offspring are the totality of the family. So each child or component of reality is distinct and unique in their own way. I remember one slogan I saw on a mug that said, "You are unique, just like everyone else." Anyway, so each component is unique, but they share the commonality of their origins and the source of their substance. So if you like, all these components share certain of their DNA with their siblings and with the totality in which they are produced from. That will be a subject in a couple of sessions' time. Now, hence all these various components are able to interact and relate to one another, but they never become one another. What they share is the ability for information to transform what they do. Now, excuse me if the family analogy is a little antiquated or even idealistic, and it's not one of the high-tech examples I promised you, but I offer it just to convey the principles of the interaction of independent components based on their individual derivation from a larger set of reality, a totality. And as I say, we'll explore that in another session. For now, let's continue on the role of time and its ability to facilitate the transformation of the properties of matter. We gave the example of the world passing in front of our eyes like the various frames of a film reel. At any one moment, at that point we call now, we see the frame that is presented to us. We use this example to kind of familiarize ourselves with the idea that we as the conscious Atma are the persistent, non-temporal witness to the many now moments that we experience in sequence, one after the other throughout our lives. And this, I hope, helped us to think of ourselves as outside of the effects of time. Time is turning the film reel. It is allowing the world to present a different picture to us at every new moment. But we remain the same conscious entity experiencing the various moments. Now, in the various Sanskrit traditions, the extent of one moment is called a kshana. It is kind of the fundamental unit of time. And Buddhism uses it also, and it has a particular philosophical view on this idea of momentarism called kshanika-vad. It takes it to the extreme that the only thing that exists is a string of these kshanas, these moments. However, Buddhist kshanika-vad doesn't allow for a witness of those moments. And because it claims that there is no perpetual witness, it has difficulty kind of accounting for our memory of previous moments, and also because there's no future witness, it's questionable who reaps the result of actions that are done now. So my preference, therefore, are the schools of thought involving Vedanta, Sankhya and Yoga, which together offer a kind of more comprehensive picture of consciousness involved with reality and time. Now, with Vedanta, Sankhya and Yoga, there are differences to how each of these sources model reality. And there's also varying amount of information on certain aspects that each can provide. So I'm going to do my best to be clear and attribute a particular idea, concept to a particular source, but in many cases I am kind of bringing ideas together in some of the aspects of today's presentation. Now, I will mention that the Atma Paradigm draws on these sources not to prove their validity, but because I believe they illuminate or elucidate certain issues that modern philosophy and science struggle with. So throughout all of this, I would like you to appreciate that models help us to understand reality, particularly how we experience it. But we've got to be careful not to conflate the description used in a model with the complexity and the profundity that is actual reality. Models are not actuality, but if you've got a good model, it can help us understand the principles at work within reality. So over these two sessions, we're going to explore kind of the world of virtual reality as an analogy of life in the material world. But in order to comprehend the nature of our existence within that type of reality, I think we need to have an idea how things actually work around us, how reality presents itself to us, and what role we play in how reality plays out. I'm going to start with an image I showed last week in relationship to the film reel. And today we're upgrading the technology. Here we are as the witness, the non-temporal witness, the observer, watching reality, but not on a projection on a screen. This time we're actually watching this mega screen of the latest OLED television screens. And these devices offer a kind of useful analogy of how things work. Let's have a little look inside one of these TV sets. OLED stands for Organic Light Emitting Diodes, and it's a setup. It's a step up rather from the standard LED crystal TVs, and in some ways it's simpler in that it's got fewer layers generating the image. Now this looks like a complicated little diagram here. I'm not going to train you how to be TV engineers. I'm just going to point out a few kind of key aspects of what is at work here, which I think are pertinent to our analogy. So you've got the setup here. The back casing is to the top right and the image on the screen is on the bottom left. And here are the other layers I want you to notice. First, the color diodes. These are the LEDs that light up when they're fed a charge, electric charge, and they're grouped in threes: red, blue and green. And the quantity or the intensity of each of these three diodes and what the light they give out can be varied. And therefore, according to the electrical charge that is fed into those three, you can produce a specific combination of the light and from a single group of these three diodes. And each of those kind of group of three diodes then, through various filters and polarization, produces an individual pixel. And that individual pixel is very small, but we could perceive it as being of a particular mixed color. Now, with the advancement of technology, these pixels are getting smaller and smaller, down to the new generation of quantum dots. But it is the overall effect of all of these pixels which then contributes to our perception of the final image of the flower, as is shown here, the flower lying on the tree stump. And it's shown, but it's obviously at a different scale to the pixels. But you understand what I'm trying to present. Now, I want to draw your attention to another layer near the back. This is the TFT substrate. TFT means thin film transistor, and it's called the substrate because it is from here that the image on the screen is generated. It's not made of lights, it's not made of glass, it's basically a layer of circuitry that determines which diodes get turned on and by how much they're turned on. And by controlling the diodes, basically the TFT controls the pixels and therefore the final image on the screen. And that's a key part of our analogy. Now, here's how that image of the flower and is generated. We start with nothing on the screen. So because the TFT substrate is quiet, there's no electricity on it, the diodes are therefore off, nothing's been fed to them. The diodes are off, there are no pixels, and the screen is blank. But now an electrical signal is input into the substrate. And that signal into the TFT layer is a packet of information. And it specifies how every diode that is in the box will be activated and by how much. Now the diodes spring to life. And each set of three diodes then forms a pixel color. And the total arrangement of all these pixels produces the effect of a complete image. So in this way, reality has been manifest for us, or to us, thanks to information being added on the substrate. And that information activating and generating tiny individual units that combine of pixels that combine to manifest a complete set of reality for us to experience. And I'm just going to suggest that that process of information adhering on the substrate and producing then a manifested picture of reality for us is a very important aspect of understanding how material reality of the world manifests to us. This whole process takes a tiny fraction of a second from the activation of the TFT through to the image. But the picture doesn't remain static. You don't want to be seeing the same picture on the screen all the time, do you? You want the picture to change. That's the beauty of it. And the picture on these OLED screens changes about 120 times per second. So how does the TV change the image? Well, because the image is generated from a specific packet of data entered on the TFT layer, the image can only be changed when the data on that TFT substrate is updated. And for that to happen, the old data must be ended. At least its presence on the substrate activating it to produce pixels must be ended. It has stopped there. So the substrate goes quiet. So the electrical signal on the TFT has stopped. And because of that, there's nothing going through the diodes. They're switched off. Because the diodes aren't working, there's no pixels and the screen is blank. At this point, nothing is being broadcast. Nothing on the screen. But this is only for an incredibly short time before a new set of data arrives and activates the substrate. And then, because the substrate is fired up, the diodes are activated, they produce the pixels, and a new picture is generated for us. So in effect, this is not a seamless flow of one image merging and transforming into the next. That's kind of what we assume reality is. It's just this constant changing of one thing into another. No. What's been shown here is that the image we're receiving is a process in which the images on the screen are pulsating from the substrate. They're coming at us one at a time. And that's because this is all happening below the threshold of our ability to register those punctuations or those flashings, changes on the screen, we experience it as seamless and continuous. So the key points I want to draw from this analogy are that the TFT layer of the TV is a neutral substrate. It has the potential to be activated in practically unlimited ways. And I think this is analogous to how the metaphysics of Sankhya and Yoga view matter. And we're going to discuss that in terms of the term Prakriti, which I'll come to. Now, this is a big issue. The extent of the universe and everything in it. If we consider that sort of level, then the substrate that we're talking about for the universe is going to be compared to the unmanifest overall state of Prakriti. Matter as raw material with no manifest attributes. And when matter is in this non-manifest state, the result for us would be, and for everything, there would be a blank screen. The universe would be zero. There's nothing to see or interact with. But like the TFT layer, unmanifest Prakriti can be activated to exhibit its potential or to manifest all sorts of forms, colours and attributes, physical properties that we can hear, touch, see, taste and smell. What activates Prakriti from the latent potential state into manifesting physical reality? It's the same as with the TV. Its unmanifest Prakriti is activated by information, a packet of data. The TFT substrate layer in the TV does not decide what appears on the TV screen. It's neutral. The circuitry just serves to make that image appear according to the data that is fed into it. The substrate has no say, no interest, no influence over the manifest images. Similarly, Prakriti serves as a neutral medium to manifest physical reality according to the information packets that are put into it. Now, being a substrate, What we mean by a substrate, it means it can bear the inherence of information. And I use those words carefully. Substrate bears the inherence of information. And just as the TFT circuitry can hold or bear a set of electrical signals on it, that's electrical data and inhered in its circuits, and that makes the circuits live. And in that case, the circuit could be considered, more than it was before. It's energized, it's potent, it can produce a sequence of effects resulting in the final image on the screen. So the same is true with Prakriti, when it bears the inherence of information within it. And when we talk about Prakriti and we talk about the information that it bears, we're talking about GUNA-DATA. Now, within both modern physics and the metaphysics of the Atma Paradigm, information has reality. It is composed of something. And for our model, information is composed of the combination of fundamental forces of nature. Not the same forces as modelled in physics. These are the forces we've talked about, the gunas. These gunas represent forces that physics actually acknowledges are at work, or at least some of them they acknowledge, but physics models only their effect, not their real state or why they work the way they do. For instance, physics talks about that things decay and disintegrate and go from order to disorder, and they say this is the effect of entropy. But there's rarely an effort to explain or define what entropy is and why it should work like that. That is why we've repeatedly said that these forces that seem to manipulate the physical state of things should be accounted for. Our proposition is that there are these three forces active within nature, and for each we use terminology to convey their mode of operation. So we say there is entropy, the force that moves things to a state of disorder, disintegration and dissolution. There's a force of formation that increases order, generates form and structure and growth, development and action. And there is stasis, the force that produces stability and permanence and maintenance, clarity and quietude. These set of terms for the gunas may be useful to show the link with physics. However, we're going to show how the gunas operate on many different ways. So for the rest of these sessions, I'm going to tend to use the Sanskrit terms, the ones that we associate with these three. For sattva, I'm going to use the word sattva for stasis. I'm going to use rajas for formation and tamas for entropy. And we represent them here in this three-way spectrum to indicate how the quantities or prevalence of each of them can be combined in innumerable ways to produce packets of data. And any one point within the spectrum is a specific GUNA-DATA packet defined by how much of each of the powers it has, how much of stasis, how much of formation, how much of entropy. And so each GUNA-DATA packet of information is a formula of the gunas that can be used to specify a particular feature of reality. And we're talking about this, not just a bit of sattva or a bit of rajas. We're talking about very complex kind of formulas being generated from the combination of the gunas. And every object in existence is a manifestation of the properties defined by these combinations of the gunas. And every thought that we have and experience is also a manifestation of the combination of the gunas. Some thoughts are uplifting and caring, so that indicates a bit more stasis or sattva. Some thoughts are more kind of ambitious, selfish and anxious, and these show more rajas. And some thoughts are dark or dull or depressive, and that shows more tamas at work. Now, there are other points I want to draw from the TV analogy. Information defining manifestation. That the information that is fed into a system defines its manifested properties and behaviour. And we've discussed that often enough. And the TV showed us how our experience of reality is an ever-changing flow of images, each one slightly altered from the previous, and in order that we experience a sense of continuous appearance and flowing movement. And in order to give us that effect, it relies on the continual sequential input of data packets. So the idea that at each moment is represented by a new set of data being fed into the substrate of the TFT circuitry, producing a new image. It's not that a new image is a modification of the old one, it is a newly generated image based on a new set of data. So our experience of reality when watching a TV screen is of continual sequence of newly generated discrete images. As I said, 120 of them every second. And according to the Yoga Sutras, this is true also of our experience of the world of Prakriti. Let me take you through that. I'm going to return to our... just want to bring up this point here, that it changed by punctuated sequence. And that whether it's on the TV screen or in our own reality, the current manifestation has to be ended, dissolved to allow a new one to manifest. So let's go back now to our non-temporal observer watching reality on his fancy TV screen. This time, as I said, it's the reality of manifest Prakriti. And last week I showed it changing from this to this. So that was very quick. I'll try one more time for you. From moment one being replaced, and it's now being replaced by moment two. So this process of everyday reality is like it happens on the TV. We start with our situation. Moment one, all the objects are manifest, our ball's in its position, and how does it get changed to its new position in moment two? Does it move through the intervening space? No. It's like the TV screen. The data packet for moment one has ended its influence. In the case of Prakriti, the observable properties start to dissolve. The Yoga Sutras explain that the physically observed properties associated with the Mahabhut elements merge back into the proto-physical state of the Tanmatras, and they continue to merge back through one another in regression back through Akash and sound. Then these aspects of the Prakriti can continue to dissolve and merge back into the cognitive elements, especially to Buddhi, intelligence, and Ahankara, the persona, ego. That's the state of unmanifest Prakriti. So in this state, there's no longer any physically observable aspect to Prakriti. All the forms and properties of matter reduced back to this substrate. In effect, the entire scope of manifest reality has been annihilated, at least for a fraction of a moment, akshana, or in between akshanas, I should say. Now, this doesn't mean that there is nothing. No, Prakriti continues to exist, but for this period, it's just not manifesting things. No observable properties or actions. Matter is back in its state of potential. Now, Sankhya explains that this potential state continues to hold information, but none of that information is activated during this unmanifest state. And as well as that potential state of the material ingredients, there's also the aggregated intention of the Atmas held within Buddhi and Ahankara. So the apparent annihilation of all the forms and manifestations merging back into the substrate of Prakriti is simply to allow the whole scenario to be reset with a new data packet. And this new data packet is generated from the source, i.e. from aggregated intention. And from the format of information within the cognitive elements, that format of information is converted into shabda, sound, which then inheres on the space grid of Akash. And I'm going to explain a bit more on that a little later. Then producing the other Tanmatras and the Mahabhutas until all the properties of Prakriti as physical matter are back with us, fully manifest, in that moment number two. And in that moment number two, we see the ball in a different location. We assumed it has moved. But what has happened is that all the things that make up that ball as a physical object were in one place at moment one, and after dissolution and being newly constituted in moment two, the things that make up the properties of that ball have now appeared in a slightly different location in space and with a different orientation. And we're convinced it just turned. Now, if this seems unreal, please be aware that quantum physics offers a very similar picture of reality, with all the subatomic particles that make up everything in the universe popping in and out of reality at every moment. And it's kind of intriguing that a process described in texts going back 1,000 years parallels those sort of concepts of modern physics. But I actually think that the descriptions within the Yoga Sutras, along with other concepts from Sankhya and Vedanta, have much more to offer our modern understanding of matter, because they integrate and include the concepts of matter, time, consciousness and information. Now, what I've just presented isn't the whole picture, because just as the world of Prakriti in front of us is fading and dissolving and being recast, so also are our bodies. The dissolution of all this manifest reality doesn't just include the things we observe, but also the things, the aspects of our body, our physical form and our organs. So along with external reality, our bodies are also fading. The Mahabhutas and Tanmatras are also dissolving into one another and back to the substrate of Prakriti. So in that in-between moment, there's actually nothing manifest, not even one atom of our bodies. But although there is nothing physically observable for consciousness to experience, our individual consciousness persists. Consciousness is not reduced or dissolved along with the rest of matter during these kind of zero periods of unmanifest Prakriti. Then, almost as soon as it happens, the next packet of GUNA-DATA inheres itself under the substrate of Prakriti, and raw Prakriti starts to manifest the various cognitive physical elements one by one, until the whole world, along with our body and senses, are back in action, and we are gathering information via our senses from the world, things to enjoy and experience. Now, I think it's hard for us to comprehend this notion of a pulsating world, especially the idea of having a pulsating body, something that comes in and out of manifested existence at every moment. It's hard because we kind of think of life as being continuous and seamless. Now, the reason we experience life as being continuous and seamless is because consciousness has that ability to smooth over the punctuated presentations that we receive from matter. And this is why I'm kind of giving this analogy of virtual reality, because whether it's the old film reel, whether it's before that in the Victorians and what they call the zoetrope, those little spinning kind of circular things where they would see movement, or you use a flick of, a flick book, of different cartoons moving, or whether it's the OLED, or whether it's virtual reality head sets, it's all the same principle. Information is pulsating imagery at us, and we are taking it as seamless and continuous. But not only does Prakriti pulse like this, there are also other processes in our everyday perception which are also punctuated. And they are punctuated with much longer time lengths than the kshanas that apply to Prakriti. For instance, after in our eyes, when the cones and rods in our retinas are activated by light, they have to rest and reset themselves before they can fire again. That means that our eyes are sending discrete packages of data to the brain. And that's why it's worked out how many times you've got to, how fast say a film reel has to be, how many images per second you need in order to beat the timing of the eye. I think the eye's about 16, something like that, 16 kind of resets a second. So as long as your screens are projecting more than 16, you tend to think it's kind of continuous. It doesn't seem jerky. But it's not just in the eyes. Our neurons also have to be reset after they fire. So our brain is basically full of snapshots of all the sensory inputs. It's not, it hasn't got a purely seamless set of kind of data about everything we're experiencing, whether it's imagery, whether it's sounds, everything else is in little packets. So there's nothing derived from sensory experience or from the world around us and in our brain that is continuous or seamless. And fortunately, the non-neural mind plays an important role in smoothing this all out. And it presents us with a kind of sequence of, again, discrete impressions, thoughts and feelings, but they're much more smooth. Now, here's an interesting thing that comes up in the Yoga Sutras. Yoga Sutras talk about samadhi, and it defines that as the state of perfect control of the mind, in which one experiences total absorption in a single focus of meditation. And then the Yoga Sutras say that even then the mind is active, and it's generating one image after another to you. You are receiving a punctuated imagery from your mind, even in samadhi. The only difference with samadhi is that each image is exactly the same. It's absolutely focused. The mind is controlled like that. So samadhi is giving you pulsating imagery, but always the same. Now, in that way, the experience of the yogi is that the mind is an unchanging state of meditation. But it's really, I suppose you could say, like watching the test card on the television, you know. Don't still have those things where, you know, there's nothing's been shown at that particular time. They put up a test card. Only obviously samadhi is a lot more interesting and more blissful than watching a test card. Anyway, I mentioned these factors of how our eyes, our brain and mind work to reassure us that the punctuation of the manifestation of Prakriti is not weird or it's not frightening. We take it in our stride. What this does confirm, I think, is the core principle that consciousness is distinct from matter. It is not changed, modified or punctuated like the manifestations of Prakriti. Consciousness is the continuous form of reality because it is not manipulated by time. It is not modified by a change of information, not modified by the gunas. Now, I believe that an understanding of this metaphysics at work with Prakriti, time and information holds the key to a much more progressive integration of philosophy and science. And I want to go back to some of the points I was making earlier about when I mentioned Shabda and Akash. Now, I think this will help to clarify the process that we've been describing. I'm calling this section Space, Time and Matter. Here's our expanse of Akash. And it's basically represented as a kind of white or grey plane. Earlier I described the underlying substrate of the universe in terms of the unmanifest state of Prakriti, the material ingredients of which this universe is formed. But there are different kind of levels at which you can regard as being substrates or subordinate substrates because of their ability to act as a kind of starting point of potential from which to generate further specifications of manifest forms. Just to use a kind of material example. So say the universal materials act as the substrate to produce all the planets that exist, such as our Earth. But you can also think of the Earth as being the substrate from which you might say many plants grow, many vegetables, say. And you can think, so in that way the Earth is a substrate, but it's a kind of subordinate substrate to the bigger one of the universal materials. And the vegetables that you have in your kitchen, you know, kind of form the substrate for tonight's dinner. Anyway, in the same way, I think we can use the TV analogy of the TFT substrate that we showed earlier. And it can apply to both the substrate of unmanifest Prakriti in terms of the overall consideration of the universe, but, and this is how I want to use it in this particular section, it can also be used to explore the functioning of this subordinate substrate of Sankhya metaphysics, the role of Akash. Akash, sometimes translated as ether, but it's sometimes space or sky, but really what it is a space grid. So that's how I'm going to use it, the field of Akash as a kind of grid of space. And in this case, when we're talking about the information packet, we're talking about that inheres on the substrate of Akash. That's information coming into it would be Shabda. So just like electricity inheres on the TFT layer of the TV, we've got Shabda in hearing on the substrate of Akash in this part of our description. So here we are at our Akash space. We're now going to add this kind of imaginary grid. And it's just to help us appreciate that in Sankhya terms, matter manifests in discrete packets within it. Now, shown here as our white dots. These represent what are called the Paramanus. Paramanus means the supreme small unit of matter. Now, often this is translated as atom. And in one sense that's correct, in a classical sense, if you mean the smallest elemental object. However, the Paramanu cannot be equated with the atoms of physics and chemistry. That's different. So we're using Paramanu as the smallest unit within the modelling of reality by the Sankhya system. And this way of modelling reality, I think, has a benefit over physics because it will show you how it incorporates consciousness and explains why the world is the way we experience it. So Paramanus are the units of Prakriti. And that is true when Prakriti is in its unmanifest state, and it's also true in every form that Prakriti manifests. Hence, all the elements of Sankhya, the subtle ones of Ahankar, Buddhi, Mana, and Mahabhuta elements, Akash, Vayu, Agni, Apu, and Bhumi, those different elements, are one type of Paramanu unit of Prakriti, but just manifesting different properties of matter. And it's said that Paramanus are distributed over the space grid of Akash. Basically, no two Paramanus occupy the same location. And here they are with the Paramanus of the Akash grid in a kind of latent state. And in this way, the Akash is like the TV, the TFT substrate of the TV. It's quiet until it receives a packet of data. And this data is going to come from the field of aggregated intention, shown here in lilac coloured plane. Now, I'm kind of simplifying this whole process. I'm leaving out details of the cognitive functions. We've talked about that in part 2 way back. I just want to kind of show information with the Paramanus and how that manifests. So we have data coming from the field of intention, and this which holds, of course, the GUNA-DATA information, and it holds GUNA-DATA information in a format of the cognitive elements. However, to activate physical objects, that same GUNA-DATA is converted into the format of a particular tanmatra, shabda, or what we commonly call sound. But this isn't sound as something audible, this is sound as a kind of subtle state. And it's a subtle state that of tanmatra that can subsequently manifest the physicality of audible sound. But initially it is the first format of the data arising from intention that is going to activate the rest of the physicality of the elements. So it's probably more accurate to say that the GUNA-DATA is embedded within the cognitive elements, and that embedded GUNA-DATA in the cognitive elements is conveyed to be embedded into Shabda. And I suppose it's a kind of conveyance of information. And I'll give an example. Say you have a mental format in your mind. You're thinking about drawing something, say like a cat. Okay, so I want to draw a cat. I've got a picture in my mind. I get the paper in front of me, and I convey that information in my mind to a pictorial form in a drawing. In one sense, the data is the same. It's just now in a different format. One was in a mental format, and the other is now taking some kind of physical form. So a packet of GUNA-DATA in Shabda format is shown here as the purple arrow, activates a particular Paramanu. I'm just going to show with the one here to keep things simple. That same GUNA-DATA then goes through the same sort of filtering and augmentation layers that the light from the diodes of a TV does. And aspects of that data that pertain to sound are used to manifest the audible properties of sound. those aspects that pertain to touch manifest properties of tactile experience. Aspects of visual data, sight, manifest properties that can be seen. Aspects of taste manifest properties that can be experienced as flavors, and aspects of smell manifest fragrances. And how much and of what type of each of those properties depends on the specification of the GUNA-DATA conveyed within and adhered within that paramanu. In this way, the individual paramanu is able to manifest itself as a tiny matter object, capable of manifesting that particular range of the Mahabhuta properties as it is specified to do. And so this can be very nicely compared with the production within the TV of an individual pixel, from the data that goes into the three colours. Now, on its own, an individual pixel isn't going to be noticed, and nor is an individual paramanu. But along with the other paramanus that make up this kind of field, they form an overall arrangement. And just like the pixels produce an overall picture on the TV screen, in the case of the paramanus, they're going to manifest actual, tangible reality. In this case, the reality of a flower on a real tree stump. Now, objects that we see as observers and that we can see and feel, remember that these, when we're talking about kind of observation of these, we're not just talking humans. We're including every Atma present and witnessing this scene. So that includes the humans, the animals, the insects crawling over it, the birds above, and bacteria and microbes around. All of them are included as sentient witnesses and represented by that one eye up there in the corner of the diagram. And all of these different creatures, these sentient creatures, respond in their own way to what they're experiencing. They may enjoy the scene, they may be excited there's food, or they may be frightened by something. And all of them express emotions along with desires and wishes to change their experience. They may want to move their bodies closer to the flower to get the nectar, or to crawl away from the bird about to peck them, or whatever. And these emotions and desires represent the intention on behalf of that each particular Atma. And all of these intentions are fed back and added into the aggregate of intention. All of them fed back. So they're fed back into this underlying data that specifies future reality. And that aggregated data, the lilac layer at the bottom, is now updated by the conscious experience of the previous moment. And that's happening in every moment. Okay, within one kshana moment. Now, so the aggregated intention is not static. It is constantly being fed by the new desires of entities as they live their lives, as they experience stuff, as they respond to it, as they desire stuff. That is all being fed back. And it is being used by the processes within the aggregated intention in order to generate the next moment. Now, change has to happen. In fact, we want it to happen. We want the variety of experience. We also want to contribute to that variety. And for the manifestation of the properties of the world to be altered, they have to dissipate. And we know how that happens. We know it's important, but it actually, in the reality, it actually dissipates different to how it works with the TV. So in this case, one by one, the properties of smell, taste, form, touch and sound dissolve back, through a kind of progression. And at that point, there's obviously nothing for mortal sentient beings to experience. But even though the properties that were manifest within the paramanus are no longer observable by our senses, the data that specified those properties isn't lost. It actually dissipates into the Akash. And it's there as an imprint and permanent record in the Akash of that moment and all moments. But basically now we've returned to that neutral moment of non-manifestation of our substrate. The Shabda is quiet. The Paramanus are not manifesting anything other than holding the state of being Akash. Now, within this level of aggregated intention, the next packet is being generated. And of course it's going to relate to and closely resemble the previous data packet that generated the previous moment. But it's going to be updated to take account of new intention that is being put into the aggregate from the experience of all those Atmas. And somehow or other nature has got its algorithms calculating the requirements for all this new data on top of the previous data, and generating the appropriate new packet of data for the next moment, and which then manifests the Paramanus and ultimately the revised, updated image. Now, this issue of how information packets manifesting reality are updated is a crucial aspect of our metaphysics. So I'd just like to conclude with describing a few points on this. It's important because it indicates that each sentient being contributes to how reality unfolds. Now, this isn't idealism. We're not just saying the world is as I think it. The world is real. And from our individual standpoint, the world is going to seem very objective. To me as one person, the world seems as it is, and I have to accept it like that. But actually, each one of us is a contributor to how reality is, how it has been, and how it's going to change in the future. So the our metaphysical view is that reality is participative. Its existence is the way it is because that's how we wanted it to be. In one sense, we got what we voted for the type of reality that we're experiencing. Now, this idea that reality is what we make of it, or we can change reality, we can manifest our preferred reality, has actual real validity in the metaphysics. However, we've got to be very careful here because too many, I think, unscrupulous self-help folk, leaders and facilitators and gurus have come along and promised the world, they're promoting, here's an easy way to manifest abundance in your life, activate your dreams, become fulfilled just by focusing your mind and thinking positively. There is a truth hidden in there, but unfortunately the way it is sold is not helpful. And one simple point, these kind of think yourself rich ideas do not work. And why don't they work? Because the aspiration, the affirmation that is stated doesn't resonate authentically with what we believe. This is a whole kind of topic that I think we want to get into next week, when we kind of look at how we are implicated within reality. So I'm going to look at a bit more of that next week, what these metaphysics really mean for us in everyday life. But now let's wrap up this session with a quick summary. So we previously applied the key principles of our metaphysics, such as concepts, non-temporal, non-embodied consciousness, and the principle of aggregated intention, and we use them to assist the information issues that within cosmology to explain why things work the way they do. Now, the main objective today was to focus on presenting the same metaphysics of material reality, but in greater detail, particularly drawing from the Sankhya and Yoga wisdom schools. So we discussed more on the punctuated nature of reality and the role that time plays in facilitating the change and updating of information into the manifestation of each new moment. And we've discussed more on the aggregated intention as the source of data packets that define the specifics of reality at each now moment. And we looked at the feedback loop that exists involving consciousness, how when each conscious entity experiences reality in this particular moment, it contributes the thought, desire and emotion back into the aggregated intention of all Atmas. And nature uses that updated aggregate to calculate the data packets for all of reality in the next moment. So you can look at this and think we're participating in a very big and connected picture of existence. Now, although we have presented this as a model, it far exceeds the ability of any other current theory to weave together these major components of reality: consciousness, matter, information and time. That's that important. It doesn't contradict modern science. In fact, I suggest that we can incorporate the features of quantum physics and also of general and special relativity into the same metaphysical model. They can handle those things. Now, it does have to be noted that the original sources of our model did not see it as a sort of hypothetical curiosity or just a theory. This was meant to be the basis of a technology that mirrors the underlying metaphysical processes of nature, a technology of manipulating matter as nature does it, by producing change in the information content within the substrate of matter. And again, we're going to have to talk a little bit about that next week. And, you know, I appreciate that many of the concepts and the process described here are complex. And I've gone through things quickly and maybe everything's not as clear as it could be. I apologize. In many cases, the sources for explanation on all these points are not always clear and complete. And, you know, there is definitely a need for greater research and study and discussion on all these points. So please accept this particular presentation as an interpretive analysis presented to the best of my understanding, and it's with all the limitations of how this material can be communicated within this kind of lecture format. But despite all that, I hope these analogies have been useful, and I hope they provide a way of thinking about this particular subject, perhaps just giving you a different perspective on our presence in this world, our experience of it. And that's the theme that we're going to be contributing to next week as we continue a bit more of our kind of high-tech examples. So in 4.7, it's again the VR analogy of cosmic existence, but this is part B, immersion and freedom. And we're going to think about how we are entranced and mesmerized by reality, and also then consider what the experience of consciousness might be in its free state. So join us live. Same time for the UK, 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 10th of December. And as always, please, if you've got any questions, send them to info@s-pi.org. Thank you very much.